So here, like who here would you rather keep their privacy to themselves and not be recorded? Yes. Okay. So in this speech, I'm responding to the claim that equipping police with body cameras that cannot be turned off positively affect the society. I'm here to prove why all of you should reach to agree with my claim by sharing how first, equipping police with body cameras increases citizen complaints, decreases full views of surroundings, and finally the defendants and judges rely on minimal footage. So with that being said, first, equipping police with body cameras increases citizen complaints. The public does not always want to be videotaped, especially by a police officer. Complaints from citizens will increase because videotaping suggests no privacy rights to the witnesses and general public. Complaints, my opponent states when an officer wears a body camera, it will improve the mentality of an officer. In my opinion, the statement is invalid and only expresses my opponent's thoughts towards an officer having poor judgment. As individuals, we should respect the officer and trust the department. Police are strictly trained professionally to be a part of the department, and the law enforcement is recognized through officers' actions, providing excellence and integrity out on the field, making the best judgment calls. In studies, people cling to social norms and alter their behaviors because of the awareness that someone else is watching. Individuals react complaintly to even the slightest cues that somebody else is watching them, rather than the individual acting how they would in a situation if known they were being recorded. An article from American Civil Liberties Union by J. Stanley states, many instances of entirely innocent behavior on part of both officers and the public will be recorded, resulting with significant privacy implications and complaints. So in addition, my second point argues body cameras decrease the full view of the surroundings. My opponent states officers' accountability will increase because in some instances there is not enough evidence. In my opinion, this statement provides false hope for instances where there is not enough evidence. Body cameras will not record accurate evidence. The cameras do not record the full view of the person's behavior and does not necessarily show everything the officer sees and why the officer reacted the way he reacted. Cameras do not have peripheral vision. Like an officer, not every angle is recorded. And my opponent argues body cameras will reduce tension between the police department and a community that has high tension. This statement is unlikely because reducing tension is a mental state of mind. The camera is used as a tool to reduce tension, but you will still hate the officers if you hated them whether they have a camera or not. So which leads me to my last and final argument of the body cameras not be able to rely on footage of the defendants and the judges. The body camera may not catch the full picture. Let's say a situation happens outside the camera view and someone solely depends on the video, as opposed to what might be happening in the surroundings. The camera will not record all of the surroundings in case that needs to be taken into consideration, opposed to what is only on the camera. If the judge and defendant only focuses on the camera footage without listening to the officer, that is a negative. The officer sees the whole surroundings. The officers enforce law, making good judgment calls, and a video will not do anything more than justify the officer did the right thing. Evidence regarding jaywalkers, speeders, rolling through stop signs, which are most common, do not need to be shown on a video to be proven. The officer wrote you a ticket, not for fun, but because you violated the law. So, to conclude, equipping police with body cameras increases citizen complaints, decreases full views of surroundings, and finally the defendants and the judges rely on minimum footage. Having heard everything I said, I strongly hope you agree and reach to the opposite conclusion of equipping police with body cameras negatively could affect society. Thank you.
All right. Well, the audience survey is a way to get the audience involved. It's phrased a little bit awkwardly, and so you probably want to practice that a little bit more. I thought that you outlined what the secondary issues were, but primarily by presenting your own counterclaims instead of explaining what the advocate's arguments are. And so sometimes we're having to contrast that position based on our fuzzy memory of what the advocate's claim were, rather than a more explicit statement. Your counterclaims ideally are going to be directly applicable to those points, but it's hard to recall without at least that prompt. The first argument, for instance, is a good example. You say it's going to increase complaints. Well, I'm assuming that the advocate's position was that it would actually have the opposite effect, that it's going to reduce those kinds of things. So now we have to figure out, well, why is it going to increase complaints? Why is the advocate's position invalid? And I don't really think that we get much here except a hypothetical example. You make assumptions about the training of the officers being sufficient. If the training of the officers is sufficient, then the idea is that there's no such thing as abuse of power, that police never do anything that is untoward toward the citizens. They never violate policy. And that's, of course, what complaints are all about in the first place. And the idea of the body camera is a way to kind of mitigate when we don't have anything other than the he said, they said position. So why is it that the other position would be valid? I think you need to come up with something a little bit stronger on this particular issue. And you ought to be talking about why the advocate's suggestion that this is going to change things is unlikely to occur, either because people will just, like you said, they don't like the police in the first place, so they just keep complaining about it all the time, or that there's some other source of tension that might be causing these problems, whether it is racial animus, whether it is long-standing rivalries of gangs in the area, whether there's people are complaining about a lack of attention from the police. I mean, there could be other explanations that are going on there. The closest we get to some explanation about people feeling their privacy is going to be violated is the ACLU quote that you have at the end, and that's a little bit generic, and again, it depends on some hypotheticals. On the second point, that we're not going to get the full view of the surrounding areas. You kind of explain a theory here. I think that I understand your point of view, that there could be additional information in the context, but you need to show, for instance, that the judges and juries would not look at anything except the video data. I think you had a general piece of information about that. Actually, you know what? That might have been a different speech that I heard. Wasn't that? I can't quite remember. That people focus on those kinds of things. And like you said, it's kind of a vague notion that we're going to fix these problems. On the last point, for example, you do the same thing. You've got a hypothetical example. What I don't hear is any explanation of why the advocate's reasoning and evidence is problematic. This is almost all counterclaim argument, so there's not really any. What evidence did the advocate present to support their position? Even if you have a weak piece of information to support your position, one of the things you could point out is, well, although I have, this testimony from the ACLU, and it's not necessarily as specific as it could be, what did the advocate present? They didn't present any evidence on their particular point. They asserted their particular claim. Or the evidence that they presented was a hypothetical example. Well, I provided you with a hypothetical example that's equally likely and probable, and then I could do a little bit more contrast. All right, thank you.